Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to dive into exposing Logic App connectors and your own custom workflows as tools via MCP, the Model Context Protocol. Now, many of us would have used Logic Apps in the past. It is an event-driven, often serverless solution. So you can think about a no-low-code experience via a canvas designer where we place actions and logic that we want it to perform. So if I think about what really makes up a Logic app, there's going to be some event. So an event is the trigger that is going to create an instance, instantiate this to spring into life. And then from that event, well, we define a whole bunch of different actions that we want it to go and perform. Now, as part of these actions, one of the huge deals is it has a concept of connectors. There's actually over 1,400 of these that really connect to any manner of service you can imagine. Yes, Azure stuff. Yes, Microsoft Graph things and Office things, but AWS, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Oracle, you name it, there's probably a connector for it. But when you think about what a Logic app is doing and the way we architect these is we place these elements of logic with a certain control flow. So the whole goal is this is very deterministic. The same event, the same state is going to result in the same output. We have these very static rules that is exactly what we want to do in many different scenarios. Now, if I was to jump over super quickly, this is a Logic app I wrote quite a while ago to shut down virtual machines. So I have here an event. In this case, it's a recurrence. And then I perform a number of steps. I initialize some variables, I list some resources, and I have some logic. So for each VM it finds, it does some things. And then for each status, I have a condition to check what I want to do. And it goes and performs various different actions. So without writing any code, I can create these really powerful workflows. But what's really interesting, if I just go and add a new action, what we have here is the list of connectors that it has available. And this list just kind of goes on and on and on and on. You name it, there's a connector to enable me to do whatever it is I want to do. Now, this idea of it being purely deterministic is evolving. There are some agent capabilities integrating with large language models or small language models. I'm going to talk about that in a different video. But realize for now, what this gives me is this way to create these deterministic workflows that perform actions and then integrate with all these other services, but also just it has all of these fantastic connectors that, hey, that would be really useful maybe for my AI application to use. So let's think about our world of an AI application. So when I was to write my AI app, so I've got some AI application that I want to write, the key things that making it artificial is this idea that it's working with some, I'm going to do a different color, some large language model or a small language model. This ability to use a probability distribution to work out the next token, the next one, etc., etc. So there's a large or a small language model involved that the AI application sends the prompt to. It can do examples, it can have a system prompt, and it gets an inference the response back. But the goal here is that that large language model only knows what it's been trained on. It was trained on probably a huge corpus of knowledge. It may have had some fine tuning done to it, but it only really has that pre-trained knowledge. And so if I want to give it additional knowledge, if I want to tell it about other tools that it can ask me to call on its behalf, well, how do we do that? So the idea is, hey, I want to expose additional tools. I want to give it the ability to have additional knowledge. There are ways we do retrieval augmented generation, but what if I want to be able to connect to many different things in a standardized way? I don't have to keep recreating the wheel. And this is exactly what MCP does, that Model Context Protocol. My AI application has an MCP client that knows how to talk MCP. And then via MCP, I'm going to talk to N number of MCP servers that expose tools, that expose knowledge, maybe expose prompts. But what's really nice about MCP servers is I, as the AI app writer, don't have to explain to the large language model what this particular MCP server can do. The MCP server will reflect its capabilities to me in a way that I just pass through to the large language model so it understands how it should use it. As the author of the app, I don't have to do it. So if we put those two things together, okay, I would like the ability to add additional tools, additional knowledge to my AI application. Well, let's focus on the idea of tools. I want to create things, look up things, do various things to a whole host of different services out there that Logic App probably has a connector for. Or maybe I've just written my own Logic App that would be a fantastic tool to add to my AI application. And this is the key capability that is now available to us. We have this idea that via Logic Apps, I'm going to be able to create these MCP servers that will expose these various things. Now, the way we're going to be able to do this today is actually a number of different ways. So think about all these different connectors that are available in Logic Apps. We start to see some of that list. Well, I can take those connectors and both via API Center and Microsoft Foundry, I have the ability to add some additional configuration because I don't want to just expose the raw connector. Because if you think about it, there's probably some additional configuration and parameters that I don't want the large language model to have to go and define myself. So when I'm creating this MCP server using a connector, can specify specific configuration I want and then expose it as an MCP server that, hey, my client could now go and use. So that's really the key point of what we want to do as part of this solution. And within the MCP server, I'm going to be able to expose N number of actions, which will show as MCP tools. So this is the whole thing of what we're going to want to do. There will be some things that I want the large language model to be able to pass as parameters. Some things we're going to pre-configure, and we're going to have the ability to control that. And the reason I'm kind of stressing this idea of certain configuration, we always want to be very deliberate about what we expose to the large language model, because we want to make sure that it has the cleanest experience. The more extra things you just pass it, the more ambiguous, the greater the chance you're going to have usability issues by the AI app, by the agent you're creating. So I want to be super deliberate that when I'm exposing capabilities of these connectors or my own workflow, I tune the descriptions, I tune what I'm exposing so it makes the most sense. It's the most descriptive so the large language model can use it. For example, maybe I have a connector that just creates an object for a service. That's not super useful. Instead, what I might do when I create this MCP server in the tool is I may configure that object to only be of a type incident. And then instead of exposing it as create an object, I will expose it as create a new incident in our service management tool. And then I would maybe let the AI app pass the severity, pass a description. So I have the opportunity to really tune and configure what I want it to actually behave as. Now, it's probably easiest to actually see this in action. So we'll jump over and look through both of the experiences. So firstly, we'll actually go back and I'm going to start in API Center. And I created an API Center instance. And one of the things you see is this option of MCP. Now, if I just select MCP, notice I have the option here, front and center, of registering an Azure Logic App. So if I hit register, I can give a name of the MCP server. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go and expose a certain number of tools. So I would just enter the name, enter description, but I want you to just remember this screen. So this is the experience of API Center. It basically takes me to register an MCP server with Azure Logic Apps. Okay, great. But I'm going to exit out of that. And instead, what we're going to do is currently, if I look at my Logic Apps, I have 3. They're all consumption plans. I'm going to now jump over to Microsoft Foundry. Now I'm in a project, and within the project, I'm going to go to Build. So in Build, what I want to do is I've currently got one agent that does absolutely nothing. I'm going to go to Tools. I have no tools today. Now, you may wonder, well, where should I use these? Where should I create this from? If I'm using Foundry primarily for my agents and my apps, go and create them in Foundry, because you're going to see a few things. I'm going to get a fantastic experience. But you do have that choice of API Center versus Foundry. But if Foundry is the platform you're leveraging, you're going to want to go and create the tools in here, because we do get a couple of nice little extras. So I'm going to say connect to tool. From the catalog, I'm now going to see this ridiculous number of things we had. So this is exposing all of the connectors that Logic Apps has. So I'm going to select the ServiceNow one. I went and created a dev account in ServiceNow. And notice what it's going to do. It's actually going to go and create me a new Logic App. And that's fine. It's detected that it hasn't already got a Logic App that it wants to use, because Foundry is actually going to have a special version of a standard Logic App that at this moment in time is completely free, through which it's going to expose these MCP capabilities. So I'm going to say, I could customize the name. I'm going to say, go ahead and create that resource. Now, one of the interesting things here it is telling me in this description is that this Logic Apps it's creating, it's only creating it because it's the first tool I've ever created. When I create other tools in the future, it can use the same Logic App. So the ratio is going to work just fine. I can actually have multiple MCP servers running in the single Logic App. And we'll come back to that in a second. Now notice we're back in exactly the same experience. It's taken us back to the portal. And notice in the background, we have exactly the same thing that API Center did. It has just pre-populated the Logic App with the one that it just created for me. And because I'd already selected the connector, it's not making me select the connector because it's already done it. Instead, it's saying, well, what actions do I want from the connector? Because the connector exposes multiple actions. So I'm going to say, let's create a record. Let's list records. And let's update records. So I'm going to do those 3. Now, there's a number of things I want to do here. Firstly, I'd have to add the connection. I already have a connection configured for my ServiceNow. So I'm just going to hit save. And now I need to start giving it the details. I need to think about what would be useful to a large language model to use this. So for my name, I'm going to say ServiceNow, no spaces, ServiceNow incident MCP server. And in the description, I want it to be useful. So I'm going to say MCP server to allow the management of incidents in ServiceNow. And then for the tools, you'll notice some of them require setup. List records just works. But for create record and update record, I have to customize them. So I'm going to click the little edit icon on the right side. And so for create records, I actually don't want this generic name. I'm going to say create an incident in ServiceNow. Because remember, this is the description of this particular tool that my language model will see. Now with the record type, I'm going to be able to select, is it user provided or the model provided? This is user. Remember, I want to make this incidents only. So I'm just going to search for incident. So I, at the time of creating this MCP server, is going to make this always an incident type record. Then I can add optional parameters. For now, I'm going to be super lazy. I'm just going to say a short description and a severity. So it saved those changes. And likewise for the update, instead of it saying updating a record, we could just say update an incident in ServiceNow. And once again, for the record type, I'm going to change this to be incident there. And once again, I can choose which parameters. So remember, system ID model, but I could select additional parameters, and maybe they want to be able to update that severity and update that short description would make a lot of sense. And you can see here, I could change it. So I could hard code these if I wanted to. I'm happy enough with the description. So what I now have is this idea of the new MCP server that I think the description would make sense to what this MCP server is offering to a large language model. And then I think I've given it decent names for the particular actions, which are the tools it's going to expose. Also, if we look at Logic Apps and I hit refresh, we can see it's actually gone ahead and created us this new one of type standard. And if we look at it, you'll notice, if I zoom in, it's actually this Foundry previews. It's a special version specific for use by Foundry only, which again, at this moment in time, is free. I can just use this. So I'm going to go ahead and register. And what it's now going to go and do is create these as new workflows in my environment. So it's going through, and notice it's bounced me back. So it has now bounced me back to Microsoft Foundry. But if I look now at the Logic App it created, it has actually created me 3 new workflows. So it's done a whole bunch of work for me to now make it available. If I go and look at one of these in the designer, it's got the request. And in the request, you'll see it's asking for those things that I made available as to be passed by the model. So it wants those bits of information from the AI application, which is going to come from that large language model. So it has gone ahead and just created those for me within there. So it's created 3 different workflows. And if we think again about what has happened here and what we're doing. So one really important point for all of this is it has created me a new Logic App instance. So it went ahead and it created my Logic App, but it has to be standard, which is what it created. Foundry is giving me an instance for free. It cannot be consumption plans. And we'll see why in a second. Now, remember, consumption is one workflow for one Logic App. It would not scale very well. But an important point here is this one Logic App here. Well, I can actually host n number of these MCP servers I'm creating. So one of these Logic Apps can host n number of MCP servers. And as we saw, one MCP server can host n number of tools. I have 3 different tools: create, list, and update, all within this. So it's doing all of this work for me. So what's happened behind the scenes as I was doing all of this stuff, when I went ahead and created this, when I did the registration, whether it's Foundry or API Center, again, it's the same thing. What it's actually doing here, remember, is it is creating a new workflow per tool, which which is what we have. And then it goes and writes that into this new logic app that it created. That's the whole thing of everything it's doing. And again, it created the logic app because it was the first time I ever created the tools from Foundry. When I create a second MCP server, it's not going to be a problem. From Foundry, it would just use that same logic app. If I was doing API Center, I would create my own logic app standard, and I get to pick, hey, which one do I want to use? So I have all of those different configurations just available for me. Now, if we jump back over for a second, one of the interesting things here is if we actually look at Foundry, it is showing us the MCP server. So it's hosted in the logic app, and then it's /API/MCP servers service, full name, service now incident MCP server /MCP. So that is the full path of this particular MCP server. And you would have noticed that when I looked at the logic app, yes, I can see its workflow. I can see it call in the ServiceNow connector. I can see the various parameters. But nowhere in here do I see the reflection, i.e., how does this tell the AI app its various capabilities? And we'll actually dive into that because it's pretty cool. But before we do that, I do want to demonstrate, if we look at our authentication, this is all plumbed to use the App Service Easy Auth. So what App Service Easy Auth does is it plumbs it up for OAuth authentication. It can use a number of different identity providers, including Entra, which is really easy. There's doing an app registration behind the scenes. There's an API key that I can actually go ahead and extract via API. It basically wires it all up for you. But in this case, what it's done, because I created it from Foundry, what we're seeing right here, this app client ID that it has right here, this is the system assigned managed identity of my Foundry instance. So what this means is the agents that I host in Foundry will actually just be able to use this without anything else. Now, if we want to be nosy for a second, if I go to the advanced tools and we go ahead and open up a console, because one of the things that's interesting to me when I first started playing with this is, well, I don't understand where the actual MCP server bit is happening. And as it turns out, what's happening behind the scenes is it's a new functionality of logic apps as part of the standard that is enabling this. So firstly, if I go and look at the host.json file, the big deal here is it's exposing MCP server endpoints. That is the thing that is looking and is now going to expose this logic app as an MCP server. And, well, what tools is it going to expose? If we poke around MCP servers, this is the reflection. This is how it's going to know exactly what to do. So you can actually see behind the scenes, I don't have to write anything. You don't need to know about this. This is completely non-required for you to understand whatsoever. You should never be touching this, but it's what's happening behind the scenes to make this work. And then, of course, well, I can go and plumb it into an agent. So let's actually go and see that. So now I'm in Foundry. And remember, so what I now have is a tool. It's plumbed in this nice tool that I created. And I've got an agent right now. And my test agent does absolutely nothing. It has no prompt. It has no instructions. It has no tools. It has zip. So I'm going to go back to my tool. I'm going to say, hey, let's use it in an agent. I'm going to use it in that empty test agent. So what it's now going to do is, you can see it's added it as a tool. So there it is. And obviously now I would give better instructions. I would give better system prompts. I would do other things. But if I was completely lazy, and I test my agent, maybe I can say, do I have any incidents? The question now is, will my AI agent I'm just hosting in Foundry be smart enough to say, okay, well, I should go and look at what MCP servers are available to me. Oh, there's one that talks about incidents in ServiceNow. It's asking me, hey, look, am I allowed to list records? I see this tool is available to me via the MCP server. I'm going to say, sure, go ahead. And now it's going to go and talk to my ServiceNow instance, and hopefully it's going to pull down a bunch of records that I have and show me. Okay, so it looks like that didn't work quite right. Let's try that one more time. So it's just, again, I've done no customization on this whatsoever. So let's say I meant incident records. Let's see if that does anything different. Again, I didn't really do a lot with those tools as you saw, but let's say approve one more time. And here we go. Okay, I don't know what I did differently that time, but there you can see it actually went and connected and it showed me the various instances. But you can see just honestly how simple that was. And that was me, zero effort, an empty tool, just plumbing that in. So what we have is the ability to now all of those various connectors that I have in Logic Apps, I can now expose the selections I want with the customizations I want as MCP servers and tooling that I can go and use in my app, which is a staggering amount of capability. And when I'm doing this in Foundry, they're just automatically available with integrated authentication. And you get all of that integration, all of the other integrations you might think about for enterprise authentication, networking, all of those capabilities, I have that ability to do here. But what about your existing workflows? Now, there's something important about if you think about what exactly is happening here to be able to be workable and used as an MCP server. So the big one is if, let's say I'm taking the idea that, okay, I want to take something that is my existing. So I've already written a Logic app. So there's two requirements I have. It has to have, for this trigger, it has to be HTTP trigger, because that's how it's going to get called. And also at the end, it's going to have to give out a HTTP response. So in my workflow that I have created, I have to be a HTTP trigger. I have to give a HTTP response at the end. But if you want to make sure it actually works well with an AI application as an MCP server, what I would actually want to do in this HTTP trigger, I would want to include a good description in the JSON for each of the various parameters you can pass. And I probably want to say if it's mandatory or not. So I'm going to tweak that HTTP trigger really for the sole purpose of it being able to help the model. Because these descriptions, this JSON, is what will then ultimately get sent via the AI app to the large language model to help it understand, well, should I do this or not? So maybe if it was a severity, maybe I would include the types of options I could have. I want it to be obvious to the model of basically what it does. And at that point, it's exactly the same. I would take my workflow that I've made sure I've got a good HTTP trigger, I've got HTTP response. I would add configuration again, because once again, there might be certain things I want to pre-configure as part of it and then leave some things open to the model. And then I can just go and add it as an MCP server into my Logic app. Now, this experience is evolving a little bit. The documentation has the step-by-step of how to do it. Today, at the time of recording, you'll see some of those files I showed you, but it is changing. And that was it. So that's how you very easily can take all of those amazing connectors, all of the great workflows maybe you've already created in Logic Apps, and super quick, make them available as MCP servers so they can then be used by any of your AI apps, your AI agents. And you saw in my example, I didn't give it enough good instruction the first time. Second time, it just worked. You would tune and tweak those various things, but it's super powerful to be able to now expose all of those great capabilities. I hope that was useful. Go and create some awesome AI apps and agents.